Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing today?
I'm fine. How about you?
Doing good.
I know my great granddaughter here. I want you to meet Courtney. This is my great granddaughter. She does all this for me.
Hello, how are you?
Fine. How are you?
I'm doing good. She's excited for this meeting.
Oh, I'm excited because your grandma, great grandma, right?
Great grandma, yeah.
She has done amazing things in her life. I've read a couple articles where ladies are really excited about the National Rosie Day and the Congressional Medal of Honor.
Oh, yes.
And now my mask into space. I'm just so thrilled over that. And I said, they tell me the coin, the Boeing is giving me a coin, one of their recently minted coins. And I understand that's going into space and they're giving it to me when it comes back. Isn't that amazing? Who'd ever know how something like this would go? And Courtney is a still college student. She's 26 now, and she's studying environmental science, which I'm very proud of.
That's
so
awesome.
She does a lot for me.
Well, Courtney, what do you want to do with your environmental science?
Right now, so I'm going for my bachelor's in environmental science, but I already have an associate's degree in communication studies. So I've always been hoping to combine the two together and be kind of like the forefront for discussion on climate change and environmental justice, things like that, because if you read any scientific articles, you'll realize that the jargon is awful and scientists don't know how to communicate with normal people.
Right.
So I want to be able to translate for people.
No, I absolutely agree with that. My daughter, my youngest one that's sitting right here, I think she wants. You can't see her. Can't see your face. There.
How old are you?
Wait.
How old is your daughter?
She's 16.
16. Oh my gosh. Good age.
Yeah.
She's doing digital learning right now.
That's where I'm at too.
Are you?
Yeah. For my university, everything is still digital right now.
Oh wow. Yeah, they've opened up some of the campuses. Now, I was going to say in regards to your environmental studies, when Sydney was younger, we would do water quality testing.
Oh yes.
A part of the homeschool group, and that's something. It was just fun. It was fun to learn a STEM thing, but it felt good being able to help the lakes that we go and play in.
Yeah, it's true. It's one of the best things you can do when it comes to environmental things is to connect with people on a community level. So that's also something that I would like to do. So it's good to hear you say that you liked helping out your community in that way, because then in the future, maybe when I do projects, I'll try and reach out from a more community-based standpoint, as opposed to like everyone needs to recycle, because one person recycling isn't really going to make too much of a difference in the grand scheme of things. But if you get people engaged from a personal standpoint in like a community-based area, then they might be able to go forth and campaign for lobbying, campaign for change in laws and things like that, because that's where we really need the change.
Yes, and just getting out there and doing it.
It's always such a nice feeling to see how people reach out. And she's had the same thing where she was in shock how many people sent her messages about her masks and everything.
Yes, I wished I had one, but I'm afraid to ask because you are, you with everything that you wrote, you have so many that you're trying to make right now.
But you know what? You're special because you're doing something special for us. So you have to give me your mailing address, and I'll make sure that you get a mask.
Oh, that's going to be so amazing.
Well, that isn't what I was started out to do. What I really wanted to do is get the American women recognized, and I worked for 40 years to do it. Yes. Where it's led to, it's unbelievable. I never imagined that I would get it this far. Never in my wildest dreams. When I started out, most people didn't even know who Rosie the Riveter was. I asked her, we just started to do this where, ask Courtney, come on and talk to the kids. Then you can introduce me. They can relate to her better than they can to me. I'm, ancient history, where she is new and she's doing what they're doing. And I think that's really nice. It's working well for us.
No, I absolutely agree with you. I think it's important for them to see you. But I also think you're right. Your great-granddaughter, her being a part of it too, seeing the two different generations continuing to do the work that's the whole purpose of this, is to pass it down.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
and that's so true. It's a new generation. It's so funny, the difference in our generations. It's
absolutely,
amazing. Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah.
because I know what I did. I've got 95 years of history behind me. And I said, the kids don't understand when I talk about the Great Depression or the Dust Bowl. They have no clue what I'm talking about, only that they may have read it in a history book.
Yes, absolutely. I can't wait to hear your whole story, everything come together.
That's like my friend says, every time I talk to you, may I hear something different? And I said, well, don't forget, there's a lot of history in this old head of mine.
Well, I mean, because you're continuing to do great things, that history keeps on going on.
Well, you should never stop learning.
No,
Never.
and never stop doing.
And no, and Courtney just gave me a few lessons this morning while we were waiting for you to come on. I'm not sophisticated when it comes to smartphones and things.
Oh,
I didn't
yes,
know.
yes.
She was reading some of the messages I've been getting from school kids.
Yeah, they gave her, it was a QR code that led to a website that had their voice recorded. So it was clicked on the QR code, did it through my phone, and then she was able to hear the messages that they sent her.
Oh,
Yeah.
how wonderful is that?
Yeah.
See, that was a new thing for us, me today.
That's phenomenal. And like I told your great grandma, Courtney, she's the
Yep.
second person that I'm interviewing that is a part of a STEM program. So the work that she's doing, the other person is, and you can look him up, he was called the Berlin Candy Bomber. And
Okay.
he was in World War II, but after World War II, he went on to serve in the Cold War, and he dropped supplies. That was his job during both wars. Now, I guess we'll get started with our interview.
All right.
What is your full name?
My name, I'm actually Anna Mae, but nobody knows me by Anna Mae. They only know me by Mae. And my name is Mae Krier, Krier. And I was born in North Dakota. And that was in 1926. Calvin Coolidge was president at the time.
Wow.
And I just grew up there in a very, during the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl. We had nothing, but we were happy. I don't think you need material things to be happy. Of course, they do help, but I had a very happy childhood.
Good. That makes a difference. And how old does that make you now? How old are you now?
I was 95 on March 21st, and California gave me a birthday party. I had so much stuff. I get so many things from all over the country. Just amazing. I said, isn't it amazing? I said, where was all this attention when I was a teenager and needed it? But
Right.
I'm so happy that this has gone the way it has gone, because it was so long for the women to get recognized. And I thought that was really a disgrace. That made me angry with our government to think that they didn't honor what the women did during World War II. We did everything, and I think we were amazing. I mean, I
Yes.
met every people from every state and every walk of life, but we were there just to save our country and save
Yes.
our men overseas, to give them the equipment they needed to win
Right.
the war.
Right. Now, where were you when you found out about Pearl Harbor, and how did you feel about that?
Oh, I'll never forget that day. It was a Sunday. My sister and I had been to a matinee. And when we came home, our folks were sitting by the radio very upset. And we asked what had happened. They said Japan had bombed Pearl Harbor. And I stood there, I'm a teenager, and I stood there and I said, I don't think I'm not sure I know where Pearl Harbor is. But of course, we found out in a hurry. We knew where Pearl Harbor was. And of course, after that, we learned all these names of these islands that we'd never heard of before. But that was the day that changed history, changed the world. Was Pearl
Absolutely.
Harbor.
Absolutely. In 1943, you left home and got on a train set for Seattle. What led you to do that?
It was so funny because my girlfriend, we spent a lot of time with us while we were growing up. We were on basketball teams together and what have you. Her father had gone to Seattle. He was going to set up housing for them after he had arranged everything. And we just decided, my girlfriend and I and my sister decided to go to Seattle for the summer. We thought it'd be a lark. We just thought that'd be a lot of fun. But the way it turned out, we loved it. And we all became Rosies at Boeing, building B-17s and B-29s. Oh, I love Seattle. I still love Seattle. I went back. The Washington Women in Trade, they do a program I think it's called watching women soar, the legacy of Rosie the Riveter. And every year they put out a calendar. And several years ago, they called me and told me I'm going to be the month of March on their calendar. Would I like to come for the release of the calendar? Well, of course, you know, I hopped right on the first plane.
Well, of course
But
you did.
it was so nice because on the plane, the man sitting beside, we started to exchange stories. And when he heard why I was going to Seattle, he told the stewardess, well, don't they tell the whole plane my story? And so now they say, so now you're a cover girl. I forget what they called it. I said, yeah, but I'm not the centerfold anymore. But we had so much fun. It was a great time. I just love Seattle. I've been back several times since I met and married my husband in 1944 in Seattle. 1945, we met in 1944.
I see. I wondered about that. After you moved to Seattle, how long was it before you signed up to become a Rosie?
Oh, well, of course, they didn't call us Rosies, and that's all publicity now. We didn't wear the polka dot band. We wore bandanas, but there was no such thing as a polka dot bandana at the time, or we didn't talk about that. But no, we were, as soon as my girlfriend's father knew that Boeing was hiring, so we signed up with Boeing right away, and they gave us 2 weeks training. Well, they took us downtown in Seattle, and they would set it up like they put a piece of metal in a vise, and we'd learn how to use the drill and how to use a rivet gun and a bucking bar. Bucking bar was very important. That's how we became buckers before we became riveters. That's the one that seals the rivet as the riveters driving that rivet in. We have a bar on the back. That's what seals that rivet. But that was quite a time. Then from 2 weeks training, they took us right into the plant working on these huge bombers. It's amazing. I was a tomboy, so it was pretty easy for me. My sister, she was more of a lady, and it was a little more difficult, but she became a very good riveter.
Definitely. I think that just molds and shapes both.
It does. It really does.
Yeah.
I mean, especially those like my sister that was more ladylike. You know, they think, well, maybe I can't do that. But by the time you get done training them, sometimes they're better than those of us who think we can do everything.
Right.
But the only thing is the difference is like being a tomboy. I had to investigate. I had to see, you know, I had to go around, see where this was, where that was. But they confined us. Our badge told where we were supposed to be, so we didn't get to go too far out of our area. But the restrooms were all in the tunnels down under the plant, and you had to be sure you stayed in your area there. And I remember my sister, when she needed to find a restroom, she'd always come and get me because she's afraid she'd get lost. That was fun. But that was the way of life then. Boeing is so huge, it would be easy to get lost in. So
I imagine.
Yeah.
I imagine even back then. What do you recall about the surge of patriotism that the U.S. saw in the days following Pearl Harbor?
Well, you know, at first when we went there in Seattle, we just thought it would be a lark, so to speak, for the first, because we'd only planned on staying for the summer. But the way it turned out, we became very patriotic. We realized how bad our fighting men needed the equipment we were making. We would work with Gold Star Mothers was a good example. The Gold Star mother said she didn't quit working because she lost her son. She said she wanted to make sure that another mother didn't lose a son because he didn't have the equipment he needed. And I thought that was so amazing. That's an amazing woman. Same way with the widows, so many widows. We see a lot more widows than the Gold Star moms, but they hung right in there and made sure that we did what our country needed. And we were very patriotic about it. Yes. But going back to my girlfriend going to Seattle, and when she went in there, she wasn't a riveter. She worked for sheet metal, and she used to have to put this aluminum siding that we put on the wings. She'd have to treat them with acid. And I remember her saying how terrible that was. So I didn't experience that part of it. I was a riveter, so I didn't have to deal with any acid or anything like that. But we all had different jobs to do, you know?
Yeah.
But I'm the last of our three musketeers, as we called ourselves.
Oh, well, you're a blessing, and you continue to do good work. What was it like for you to know that you were part of the armed forces?
Oh, I'm so proud. If you talk to any relatives, I don't know how many you've met, but if you talk to any of them, they're just so proud of what we did. It was amazing. It just, you know, they weren't, up until 1941, it was a men's world. They didn't know how capable American women were. And what we did, sometimes we were better than the men, not that we were competing, but we were, women's, their hands are agile. Some things we can do better or faster, not the strength or anything like that, but we were every bit as good as the men. And I said, it's just amazing the pride we took in what we were doing. Hap Arnold, he's the 5-star general from the U.S. Army Air that we didn't have an Air Force yet. He would come in, he'd walk through the plant and he'd shake our hands and talk to us. And when he'd leave, we'd just be so proud of what we were doing.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
Now, what was your training like learning to build B-17 flying fortresses and B-29 super fortresses? What was your training like?
Well, I always loved the B-17. I liked it much better than the B-29. But in between, I went out on the Air Force for about 6 months, out on the airfield at the hangar out there for about 6 months. They were the engineers were modifying the planes that the president flew in. I think they were Stratoliners, and we were there. The engineers would modify it, but we'd have to wait till they decided what they wanted to add to the plane or how they wanted to change it. So we would spend a lot of time waiting, and I didn't particularly like that. I liked to stay busy, so I was glad when I went back into the plant. And now they had converted, while I was out there, they converted from 17 to the B-29. So my last a month or time working at Boeing was on the B-29. But that was a totally different rivets and everything. Now we were working with rivets we had to take out of the freezer. They were cold rivets. And they're flathead. We just have to use a flathead die for our riveting. It was different, but once you learn one, you pretty much adjust to the other. But my favorite's the B-17.
The
In fact, the
B-17.
lady that did my store, she said, she called it my love affair with my B-17. and I finally got a ride in. It was 73 years it took me, but I finally got a ride in one.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's really neat, though. I did not know that you had to put the rivets in a freezer.
Yeah, that's for the B-29 we did. They were frozen. And if you, with the frozen rivet, you can't keep them out too long. If they start getting warm, they'll crack when you rivet them. So we had to work pretty fast. We'd only take out so many at a time. And then, of course, you're dealing with the countersunk. Everything was countersunk. And that's I'm working on the wing. And then the cell, that's where the engine goes. So that's my experience with that. I've never worked on the body part of it, but well, it's all pretty much runs, it's the same. Like in the cell, you're in a confined spot, right? Very, very confined. And the wing now, when we were buffers, you had to crawl in and out of that wing. Oh, it's a good thing we were young and naive, because if you couldn't go in there if you were claustrophobic.
Right? Or you'd have to get over that feeling really quickly.
Right, that's why they like us young naive kids, I think, because we didn't. Well, we would climb trees like I climbed trees. So what's the difference? I climbed in a wing, So
it's no big deal. Please walk us through what a normal day looked like for Rosie to build airplanes.
It was, I don't know, we'd get up in the mornings. It was so funny because we lived fairly close to the airport, 2 miles away. So when we'd go to catch the bus to come into Boeing, by the time the buses got that far down the airport way, they'd be packed. And sometimes the bus couldn't even pick up anymore. But if they did stop, they just push you on. You're like sardines.
Wow.
One experience that we laughed so because the man was on the bus going by, and they pushed him on the bus, but his lunchbox didn't get all the way in. And his lunchbox was hanging out the back door. It had those rubber things where they close the door, but his lunchbox didn't get in, but he did. It was just funny. We never forgot that. But that was just another of our experiences of, But no, our day was a normal day. I think most generally 8 hours, unless there was a need for more production. And sometimes they'd ask us to work a little longer, sometimes Saturdays. I remember working Thanksgiving Day, which was unheard of at that time. But if they needed us, and this is what we did. And it's so funny because I was so active, and I'd work all day and dance half the night. I loved to go dancing and what have you. I look back on it now and I said, oh my God, how did we do that? But it was a fun time in our life, even though it was a very serious time in our lives. And of course, now we're coming out of the Great Depression, so we're making money.
Right.
We never had money before. We never, even if we learned how to work, that's why they say, how could you do it at 17 years old? I said, well, you know, when you come out of the Great Depression and Dust Bowl, you have a different personality or way of life. You're ready for work. You've learned how to work. You know,
Right.
anything you get out of it, you appreciate.
Right. Exactly. It's the way life is, and it's so amazing that you all were able to have that feeling of working, the newness that came from it. And like you said, even though it was a serious time, it's because of that fulfillment of accomplishing something that helped the country. You knew you were doing your part to make a difference. And
It's
it's
the pride. It's the pride. We all still carry, all of us, Rosie, still carry that same pride. We're so proud of what we did. We did, and like I said, I'm glad to be, like I brag about some of these women, but I'm glad that I was part of it. I'm just as happy that we all went through that. And I don't think I hear anybody that have regret about anything. And you know, we came from all over. Most of us were 17, 18 years old. And we came from every state. When we were in Normandy, I don't know that I told you 5 of us were invited to Normandy for the 75th celebration of D-Day. And they really honored us over there. And as we got to know each other and talk, they were shipyard workers and I was a riveter from Boeing. One was from Minnesota, North Dakota, Oregon, and Arkansas. And all of us were either 17 or 18 years old. There was a couple that were a little older, but most of us were 17 right out of school, right into the war, you know, working for our country. But we just loved what we were doing. You know, it was the time when we honored our parents, we honored our country, we honored our flag. We wouldn't dream of saying bad things or like what's going on now. When I seen them climb the Capitol walls and what they did, what the radicals did, I just was just shuddered. I couldn't believe my eyes because we honored our building. It's only a building, but we honored everything it stood for.
Right. I know. And I'm going to be working on some other projects to try to hopefully help bring unity back to our country. So
it's so important.
It's a TV project that I'm almost all the way done with. That my hope with it is to help people remember history. Some of it's good and some of it's bad, but to help with that, but also to have fun, but also to have that unity. And like you said, you know, for people to recognize and have patriotism again. And it's just very important that we get back to that.
Well,
And
I keep using, I use 2 words, and that's respect and honor. I said, we don't always have to like what's going on. I know we need fixing. There's a lot of things need to be correcting in this country, but that's not the way to do it. I mean, I just can't even believe that anybody would carry on like that. I mean, I know there has to be a way to do it and do it right, but we do need a lot of changes. But I'll never accept what they did in Washington.
When you were working on the planes, was there ever anything an accident that happened or any incidents with any of the ladies?
Not that I remember. We were pretty safe. I worked on the wings and the nacelle, and we're on a platform, and that was set up. It's probably about 3 feet high, maybe like that. But as I recall, I don't recall any accidents at all. I mean, there was maybe a few where somebody got their fingers hurt or things like that, but nothing real serious, which was good. And it was so funny because when we built the 5000 B-17, we all got to paint our names on it. It was like you know how they honor a battleship or the christening of a battleship and all. Well, we helped push that plane out on the tarmac. I said, my God, if OSHA would have seen it, OSHA, they'd had a fit. And of course, it wasn't OSHA at the time. They, you know, it was just a matter of safety. But we just had such a good time. It was such an amazing thing. One of the nice things I like about Boeing, I'm going back to women now. They had written out, I think it was Intelligence, or I think that's what the name of the Seattle paper, I forget. But they said that Boeing said, even though we're doing a man's job, they still want us to remain feminine and if it's all right to wear your makeup and your nail polish. I thought that was nice. Of course, we had to live by standards, you know, of good shoes, of if we drop something on our feet, things like that. But I thought that was really nice. I like that.
I like that too. I like that too. I've wondered about that. And I think that's great that the men allowed you, for those that wanted to wear makeup, to continue to be yourself and to do that. And I guess I could ask it now. Did you have men that were working alongside of you?
Well, at times, a lot of women said they had a hard time with the men didn't accept them, and they had a hard time with it. But I never experienced that. I worked with a man from Iowa. He was a riveter, and I was a riveter at the time too. But when they'd have a special place, the engineers needed a riveter. Why he'd always ask me to go with him because of my experience as a bucker, and it was just so nice. We just got along so well, and so often I think I wished I'd have stayed in touch. He's older than me, but he was from Iowa, and I never forget. He used to play tricks on me. He'd send me to the tool crib for something stupid, and they'd really laugh. They'd think it was so funny. At first, I felt like a fool, but I got wise to that too. So it was a fun thing. But we worked so well together. I think of that so often. I just wish that somehow or other I would have stayed in touch. But we were just so glad when the war was over and everything went back to normal. We didn't think about 95 years later. You're thinking about these different things.
Absolutely. Yeah, I could understand that completely. Did anyone ever get hurt while they were building the planes? And you mentioned a couple of the ladies.
That got hurt? You mean?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't remember anybody getting hurt. If they did, it's not on my mind right now. I think it was pretty safe. All the working conditions were pretty safe. I'm sure in the different areas. It all depends on what part of the plane you were working on, I believe, too. Once in a while, I know they used to have those overhead cranes that would move things overhead. I know once in a while they'd have a little problem with something there, but I don't know if there anything ever being too serious. Of course, we didn't get to know what was going on in all the other sections, or just, we would do the wing, and next thing we'd know they'd be connecting that wing to the body, and then all of a sudden here we got a whole plane that we're pushing out on the tarmac.
How
So
cool is that?
It was fascinating. I don't remember how we made, but we really produced them fast.
So you didn't always have the same area that you worked on, or they would add plane parts to it. So you would always see the plane at a different level of build, right?
Right. We would do, like I said, we worked on the wing and then the cell. That's where the engine goes. So many people, especially now, a lot of women didn't realize that they were Rosie. They thought if they didn't weld on a battleship or didn't put a rivet in an airplane, they weren't a Rosie the Riveter. And I tell them, I said, we didn't make those engines. We didn't make the tires. We didn't make the electrical system. You're just as much a part of that plane as we are, even though we put the rivets in it. They just didn't realize that they were every bit as important to that plane as we were.
Oh, I think they do now.
I hope so. I mean, it's a shame because we're at the end of the line. There's so few of us left. And especially those that can get out and do something, to help promote women and help these young girls. I want to see more girls in space.
Yes.
I love the space program. And there's so many of them that are studying, the history and of course the science, things that, they'll find what they like to do. Yes. I think that's nice.
I just
when Sally Ride made her first trip in space, you can't imagine how I felt.
Oh, I do imagine. I remember that. I remember seeing that as a teenager on TV. I just,
and it's so cute. When we were growing up, we had nothing, no radios, no television, nothing like that. And my father was a great storyteller. And so in the evenings, we'd sit around the pot-bellied stove, and my father would tell us stories. And he always told us stories about the man in the moon. And I was just big eyes. I just loved everything he was telling. And I walked in the Veterans Day Parade in New York, where Buzz Aldrin, he's the second man on the moon, with the Grand Master. I've been in Kennedy Space Center, where I got to kiss an astronaut who had walked in space 3 times. I said, and I was there when the Falcon, Falcon rocket went up. The Air Force took me right up as close as we could get to see that go up, and they gave me a 3-hour private tour of Cape Canaveral. I thought, if I could just tell my father, he'd never believe what we've done with that man in the moon. It's so amazing.
That is amazing. You were being prepared before you were even grown, and that's where God puts things in our life as little kids, and helps us to see interests in our life that build as stepping stones for later in our life.
You do. You don't realize it. That's what I said to the kids in Courtney and all. When I started this, I had no idea where I wanted to go with it, because I just wanted to know, just didn't think it was fair. that they didn't honor the women. They honored the men, came home to parades and flags, and Rosie came home with the pink slip. It just wasn't fair because they'll tell you, they couldn't have won the war without us.
Yes.
And I thought it was so unfair that we didn't get recognition. So I just started writing. I'd write everywhere to different places and people. And finally, in early 2000, the paper picked up on my story, and it just snowballed after that. But it's just been really great, and it's done great things for the women. I'm so thankful that I was able to help. Of course, it
Yes.
takes a lot of us to do it, against them, not just me.
It does.
You know?
It does. And for anything, it takes time. And, you know, and you see that with your accomplishments. And, you know, I know that there's certain things I need to do for my country. And that TV show and doing this is something that God laid on my heart and told me, start interviewing these vets, get these vets to the Library of Congress, you know, and because that's a part of preserving our history. And this TV show is another part of it. But even my oldest daughter, she's in a wheelchair, and I'm working with her to do a book, and I asked her what she wanted to write, and she wants to do something on women's empowerment.
I said, you know, how could the women do any worse than the men have done? I mean, you know, we got brains too.
Yes.
And I think that's so important for these young girls. Realize it. I'll tell the kids in school, don't think that just because he's a boy, he can do it better. If you have a dream, you follow your dream, you work for it. There's no limit now what the girls can do. Right. You know, in my day, the girls, what was your role? You were meant to take care of the rest of the family and cook good meals and what have you. That was a woman's role, but that's not the case anymore.
Definitely is not. And when I look at young ladies now, I see that they absolutely know that they can do more, and that they can accomplish much and do different things. You know, my sister-in-law was a parole officer, then a private detective, well, a police officer, then a private detective.
Yeah, could you imagine me even hiring a woman for a police officer years ago? I wouldn't have dreamed of that. They think we're the weaker sex, and sometimes we have more common sense where it comes to how to handle a situation. But you know, we're mothers. We learned a lot from being mothers.
That's what my executive producer with the group that I'm a part of. I'm one of the producers, and he calls me, as well as the cast and crew, they call me the mom. You know, yeah. So, but I like that. I want to be a different kind of producer. I don't want to be one that yells and screams at people and tell them they're not doing it right.
Well, you know, I tell the kids, you know, don't worry about making mistakes because you learn more. So often you learn more from your mistakes than you do from doing it right the first time. It isn't a matter of how speedy or how fast or slow you are. It's how determined. I think what helped me is because I was so determined. I just didn't let up. I'd write, and I just was persistent, I guess. Like Senator Casey said, Mae, you were an unpaid lobbyist, because I spent quite a bit of time in Washington, you know, with meeting different people and just talking to different offices and just going around, just doing whatever we had to do.
And we're going to get to that part here in a second. Now, this is where I had the question with the men working at Boeing at the time. How did they view you and your fellow Rosies?
Well, you know, I think that probably the older women were more sensitive. I probably didn't realize it, but a lot of the women said that the men treated them very disrespectful. In fact, there was a case. Now I don't know this. I've heard this. With this one man, the men could, you know, get fresh with the women. They didn't do anything about it at the time. And this one inspector kept after this one woman, and you couldn't smoke, but you could chew tobacco. And he would spit near her equipment. One time he spit on her equipment. She refused to continue until he cleaned it up. Well, we all just stopped and we thought, well, she's going to get fired. But they didn't. They made him clean it up. And well, he learned a lesson. He didn't do that again.
Good.
But it wasn't fair because, no, I didn't experience this. I had a good experience, but a lot of the women said they were treated poorly by the men. So
that's so sad.
But I can't, you know, I'm only speaking for myself. I didn't experience it.
Right.
In fact, I've always been fortunate to be able to work with different good people.
Right. Now, I'm glad that didn't happen to you, but that's so sad that it happened to some of the others.
Yeah.
Do you remember any? And this is one you kind of mentioned already. Do you remember any of your fellow Rosies that you trained with, and you still keep in contact with them?
my girlfriend. I just felt so bad because she just passed away. We went to Seattle together. We grew up together, and we kept our life going. We showed each other our children's pictures of our children and our graduations, our weddings, everything. And just last week, here their daughters sent me back it was like an album almost, but all of our stories of our lives was what I sent her. Now I've got hers here in my closet. So that was we went there in 1943, in the early May of 1943, and we stayed in touch. We've learned to use the computer. We've learned to stay on Facebook together. It's amazing. I felt really bad when I lost her, but like I said, I'm the last of the three now. So
Right. Yes. I'm sorry.
but she
about
was
that.
always, she never was active as a Rosie, but she was always so proud of what I was doing.
Yes, I
Yeah.
imagine so. Um, let's see. Do you remember any of your teachers who taught you how to build the planes?
You mean in Boeing?
Yes.
I don't know. You learn from everyone. Like I said, this man from Iowa was the best experience I ever had because he made me a much better riveter or bucker than I would have been. And I don't know how we ever really connected, but personalities, I guess. But like I said, he played tricks on me, but we worked so well together, and we were both good at what we did. And like when he said when they invited the engineers, wanted him to come out on the hangar out on the airfield to we were modifying these planes that the president and the dignitaries flew in. When I would sit in those planes, I looked at, they were so stripped down. There was nothing like Air Force One now. I thought, oh my God! I said, and they were all prop planes. They were nothing jet about them, you know. But it was when I look back on it now, I think that was quite an experience in my life.
Yes,
But no,
absolutely.
as far as people, I'm a people person. I don't. I usually get along with most everybody. Once in a while, I hit a snag, but that's normal.
Yeah, that's going to
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
In Seattle, did the media ever mention anything about the work that you Rosies were doing during the time of your service?
Well, I think they always praised us. You know, they encouraged us in every way they could because they needed us. You know, they needed us bad. And like people said, "How did you get a job?" And I said, "Well, they were looking for people. They'd hire anyone off the street. I mean, they really needed production of people that would work." And so it was getting a job, that was easy. That wasn't a problem at all.
hmm How many hours were there in a usual workday for you Rosies?
I think mostly it was an 8-hour day. But like I said, sometimes we'd work on the weekend if they needed more production, needed something out in a hurry. Or like I said, we worked Thanksgiving Day, which was really unusual then. That wasn't heard of. Now it's common,
Right.
but we did. We didn't even question it. If that's what they said they wanted us to do, we did it. I
That's
mean, we were
awesome.
there to win the war. Our men needed this equipment.
Absolutely. How many planes do you and your fellow Rosies think you made during your time at Boeing?
Oh my God, I have no clue. I know when we made our 5,000, that was May of 1944, and that was
Wow.
5,000 since Pearl Harbor. So you can
Wow.
imagine, we made a total of 12,000 altogether, but 6,000 are Seattle planned. But now the B-7, the B-29, when that came along, they were having trouble with that. I think it was fire in the engine or something, so that was harder, slower getting set up for that. I think we only made maybe 4,000 B-29s. But
So
that's still
go ahead.
that's still a lot of planes. And then I just keep
Still
in
is.
touch with the historian and see all I did at that time. And I've asked him was it possible that I had rivets in the Enola Gay, and he said it was possible. He gave me the contract number, but I thought, wow, might have put rivets in the Enola Gay, but I found out later it was made in, I think it was Wichita or Omaha, one of those places. So I said, well, there went my fame. But you know, I thought I could have had, and it's a nice feeling.
So Boeing had made 12,000 planes altogether, but you guys had made what, 4 or 5,000?
I think in the Boeing plant in Seattle, we made 6,000. That's the B-17s. I think it was 4,000 for the B-29s, but I'm not sure whether that's all in the Boeing plant or not. I know I went to the one, I think it's Marietta, Florida, not Florida, Georgia, and now they had a big B-29 plant there. I don't know, so I'm not sure just how many in total that we made.
So Marietta, Georgia, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just
I
did an
live.
interview with them a couple of weeks ago.
Did you really?
Uh-huh.
I live 2 towns away from Marietta.
Do you
My
really?
church my church is in Marietta.
Oh, because they had the Boeing, you know, have the nice, they still have that Boeing sitting in their yard, the B-29.
Wow.
And yeah, in the factory. They did that when I was down there at the Atlanta convention. I think that it was still in the yard when we were there. I mean,
Wow.
I didn't visit the plant. We just went by and they just showed it to me. So they might have removed it now because they tried to keep the 5000 B-17 as a what do you call that? Where they keep it for memorial reasons. But
Historical.
they didn't get enough votes to keep that. So maybe, you know, they can't keep them forever unless there's a place like the Smithsonian or someplace where they can keep them. But
Right.
they deteriorate, you know, as the time goes on.
Right. Yeah, you're right. They really do need a museum or something. They've got Dobbins Air Force Base, and I don't know, they may have one there. But yeah, I'll have to check that out. That's pretty neat.
Yeah, because it was sitting right there in front of the plant.
Did you sometimes have to fix the planes?
No, we had nothing to do with that. We were building from scratch. I
Okay.
mean, that was a different, altogether different, you know, organization. Back when my husband's in the Navy, he was Naval Air, and he used to do a lot of repair on the planes that would come in when they come in too fast and they go forward and bend the propellers, things like that. He did a lot of work like that.
Okay. Well, I meant a favorite part, not a sad, like, was there a specific part of the making the plane that you really enjoyed?
No, I never thought of that.
Mm.
Not in
Okay.
particular. I just liked it all. I mean, I can't think of any particular time. I'm sure that tonight I'll think of it in the middle of the night.
Did you ever encounter segregation? If so, what do you recall about it?
I know there must have been some, but I didn't experience that. Well, of course, you know, I come from the Middle West. I was never raised to be what's the word I'm looking for?
Racist?
No prejudice or anything. I don't remember. So to me, it didn't make any difference whether we're black, white, or yellow, or what have you. Yeah, one of the stories I tell, and this is a cute one. This is no offense at all. It's just sometimes usually I don't tell this one, but this one I always get a kick out of because when we work in the nacelle, that's where the engine goes. Well, that's a really confined space. So usually you've got the riveter and the bucker in there, and then the mechanic. It's very confined. And we had this young Filipino guy. He was we all liked him real well, but he had the stinkiest of feet. Oh God, when we get in there, you know, that small space, and we'd all like draw straws to see who's going to work there today. But there's
Oh
no
no.
offense toward him
Right. Right.
just
It was nothing personal. It's just those stinky feet.
no, I don't. And now I'm very involved with the group in Philadelphia, the colored ladies that there's 65,000, 600,000 that never got any honor at all. You never seen a colored lady with doing the arm like the white
Right.
woman with the poster and all.
Right.
And it's really a shame because one I like so well, and I've been in the Capitol with her, and I've been in our Harrisburg. We've been invited for Rosie the Riveter Day there in Harrisburg. And she was a sheet metal welder on the USS Valley Forge in Philadelphia. Her job was every bit as important as any of ours.
So
and I said, you know, why did it take so long? And now with the mint, I don't know whether you might want to get to this later about the mint that they're making for us. But that's one thing I made sure when we talked to the mint, that you include all these women, everyone, black, yellow, white, whatever we are, because we were all in it together.
Absolutely. Now, the red bandana that is shown in the iconic picture was something all Rosies wore. There was a purpose for wearing those bandanas. Please tell us what that purpose was.
Well, yeah, we had to wear bandanas, but the red, white polka dot, that came from the poster, I think. I don't know. You know, once if something takes like commercialism sets in and they really promote it. But I know my favorite bandana was like a maroon knit because it would stay on my head better. But you had to wear a bandana because if you're working with this equipment, especially a drill, if a drill gets in your hair, it just pulls the cob right out. I mean, it just twists right out. So that was important that you wear the bandanas, and so that wherever you were working with equipment, that would couldn't get caught.
Right, right. Now, did any Rosies ever get injured while working on the plane?
I
Go ahead.
think one that I recall got her hair caught in a drill, but it
Oh,
wasn't too disastrous. She was lucky it only pulled a small gob out. But most generally, no.
good. Good.
Mhm.
I'm glad to hear that. Did you ever listen to Axis Sally or Tokyo Rose?
No, I mean I knew they were there, but I didn't pay much attention to them. I mean, what I've heard of them now is mostly because you see the war movies. But
Mm,
at that time, we didn't pay. Don't forget that the news we got about the World War II, it wasn't like instant news like you get on TV now. We used to have to go to the theater to see Pathé News, to see where they're fighting. Like, who knew about Midway or Guadalcanal, Leyte, all those islands? We knew nothing about those islands. And
right.
this is when we would find and see what our soldiers were going to, our men and women, same way with our men on them. Like my brother, he was in Leyte, that's one of the Philippine islands. And he said after the war, he said, "You've never lived till you see one of those kamikaze planes coming at your ship." He said that scared the life out of you.
At any point during the war, did you ever worry that the Allies might not win?
I don't think it was there. I'm sure it was there in the back of our minds all the time, but we didn't fear it. Boeing was pretty well protected. We had those barrage balloons all over Boeing's plant number 2 where I worked. I was in Georgetown. They were it set low between the hills, and they had barrage balloons all over, so there was no low flying plane that could come in. And what I found out later that I didn't know during the war is the top of the building was camouflaged. It had they made it look like it's just like it was another city, street lights, people walking, mannequins, and it looked just like a regular street. And I didn't know that till after the war.
But did you guys have a rank? Like
No,
the men? No?
no, we were just civilian workers. I mean, it was the waves, the waxing waves, and the people like that had ranks or lieutenants or colonels or what have you. No, we were just an employee of Boeing.
Okay. All right. Where were you when the war ended, and what were your thoughts?
When we were heading back to base, the war was declared over when we were halfway across the country going back. And every time the train would stop, I don't know, the people were bringing them liquor, but people would meet the train to celebrate. And the train was about 90% military. And by the time we got back to Washington, these young servicemen were so drunk. I think I said they were sick pups by the time we got back to Washington. I remember that so well. But that's how we said, and of course, then now we got back, we had to wait our turn to find out when we were going to be discharged or when he was going to be discharged.
Now, when the Korean War began, you signed back up to be a Rosie.
Right.
Were you still working for Boeing then?
And there was a lot of union problems. So there were so many strikes. We had so many strikes that it was really difficult after World War II. When I needed the money, or we needed the money, that's why I went back to work. It wasn't because I was flying flags or, doing the same things I felt about World War II. But it was so funny because I went in there, now I'm working on this tiny little tail. I'm not sure if it was an F-4, it was a fighter jet. Well, we knew nothing about jet planes at the time. But it was just interesting, but I didn't work too long. I mean, like I said, I went to work because we needed the money because we'd been on strike so many times. But that was my experience with the Korean War. And I've met one of the men from the Korean War. We enjoy, we take a group of us out to dinner every so often. And it's just so nice to know, he's taught me so much about the Korean War that I knew nothing about.
Wow.
So, it's nice. It's nice to meet you. I'm very active with the veterans. The honor flight took me to Washington with them. And every time they come home, they tell my story. I always place a rose on the missing in action table during the ceremony at the banquet, and they always tell my story, which is really nice. They treat me like I'm one of the veterans.
Yes, because you are.
I really not, but it's nice to be treated that way.
Yes, it is. Was the method of building the planes the same, or had it changed from World War II to the Korean War? And it sounds like it did.
Oh yeah, there was no comparison at all. Now they're jets, when we didn't, there was nothing jet about our B-17s and what have you. And now they were all jet fighter planes, things that I knew nothing about. But like I said, I learned new things there too. I learned different ways, like with squeeze gun, rivet squeeze gun. I used a little bit at Boeing, but I used a lot more there, and I learned how to read the plans a little bit. I learned to do that, but I never got really good at that.
Mm. And altogether between World War II and the Korean War, how many years did you work as a Rosie?
During I started at Boeing in May of 1943, and I worked for Boeing until it must have been in April, late. Yeah, it had to be April because we got married just 8 days after President Roosevelt died, and so my husband was transferred. So I went to work for the Army Engineers instead of Boeing.
Hmm.
No, that was just the last few months of the war.
Hmm. Now, after the war, you noticed that men were recognized for their service in the war, but women were not, and that bothered you a lot, which led you to start your mission to help Rosies get recognized for their war efforts. Please tell us when you started this mission, and tell us what that mission was, which
Well,
I know what it is, but please tell us when you started.
Well, it was so funny because now my children, I think, had graduated from college already. I'm not sure, but one day we were sitting there talking, and my son said, "Mom, I never knew you worked with Italian prisoners of war." And I thought, our children don't know what we did during the war. We better write this down or do something. And I just started writing. I said, this is not fair that they don't know what the women did, or that, what we did wasn't important as far as they were concerned. And I said, so I just started writing. I'd write to anybody who'd listen, television stations, newspapers. Just when something would come up, I'd just sit down and write a letter. And I did that for nearly 40 years. And like I said, until the early 2000s, when a paper picked up on my story, and it just snowballed. One of the groups out of honor of seniors, they grant wishes to seniors. They read my story and told the newspaper that they wanted to send me to California to our national convention. And that was really a big beginning for me too. And I stayed their Twilight Wish Foundation. They're in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, and I stayed active with them. They just grant such beautiful wishes to seniors. And it's just so nice. I mean, it's good, happy things, sad things. It's just a nice thing. One of the things that I really treasure and I like is it was one of the men that when he said when he died, he wanted his ashes to be found and scattered from a B-17 because he'd been a crew member. So when he died, his brother took his ashes, and the Twilight Foundation paid for the whole thing. They took his ashes up in the B-17 and scattered it to the wind. This is the thing that the Twilight Wish Foundation do for seniors. And I just think it's really a nice thing.
I love it. I love that they did that for him.
Well,
That's
they call
amazing.
me their ambassador because I do so many different things. I've done things with them and without them, or just promoting them. I just think it's a wonderful that they do it. This Cass, the lady that Cass Clarkin, the one that started the foundation many years ago, she was just here. She just came with the businesswomen of Pennsylvania. She was here about 2 weeks ago. And then we just had the best time together. She said she just had to bring him to meet me. And I was so nuts. We just have such a good time together. And it's so rewarding because it's nice things for people. We kind of lose sight of what's nice and how somebody that sits back and probably doesn't ask for anything, when they get a wish granted, it's like a miracle to them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's one of those things when people are not expecting it and then it does happen. And that's the way that they look at it is that it is a miracle.
It's a fun thing. If they do a lot of fun, take them up in balloons, hot air balloons or ball games. But another one I like is a colored lady had lost her son and she was destitute. And she didn't, of course, she could bury him, but she didn't have there's no money for a gravestone or what have you. So Twilight Wish made sure that he had a gravestone. And I just think to me, that was so meaningful.
Now, you did say that with this mission that you've been working on it for 40 years, right?
Uh-huh. And I think it's close to 40 years. I'm not exactly sure the date I started. Some of the letters I still have, but.
So how does it make you feel to see the progress that has been made due to your perseverance?
Well, it's so funny because Senator Casey, he's called me a few times. He's the one, Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick has done outstanding things too. These are local politicians. Senator Casey, he's the one that introduced the Congressional Gold Medal. And, you know, I worked so long and hard with it, didn't pass the first year, but I'd known about it before that. But when we finally got it equal, he said to me, how do you feel now that you've gotten the gold medal? And I said, you know, I'm just thrilled to death about getting the medal. But my feeling is the journey getting there, these people that I've met along the way, it's just been outstanding. I've just met the most wonderful people. And you know, with well, we won't get to my mask making, but I'll tell you about that too.